On this week's Prequel episode, we follow up on our Practical Magic listener polls and preview Carrie. Hello, welcome back to another Prequel episode of This Film Is Lit, podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. We're just going to get right into it with our Patron Shoutouts.
I put up with you because your father and mother were our finest patrons, that's why.
We have no new patrons this week, but we do have our Academy Award winners, and they are Vic Vicious, Matilde, Steve from Arizona, Paul, Jeff Niederhofer, Teresa Schwartz, Ian from Wine Country, Winchester's Forever, Kelly Napier, Gray Hightower, Gratch, Just Gratch, Shelby Says Air Elemental Cycle Book 4 is out now, That Darn Skag, V. Frank, and Alina Starkov. Thank you all very much for continuing to support us at that $15 a month level. We truly appreciate it. Katie, let's see what people had to say about Practical Magic.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
On Patreon, we had 0 votes for the book, 4 for the movie, and 1 listener who couldn't decide. We had 1 comment from Matilde, who said, I went with the movie simply because I couldn't get into the book and finish it. I gave it a solid 70 pages try and it just didn't vibe with me. On the other hand, I've watched this movie dozens of times and I've loved it just as much, if not more, over the years. I adore everything about it. The music, the tones and their shift, the one-liners, everything. It's a quintessential 90s romantic dramedy, gotta be one of my favorite genres. It's perfectly cast. Stockard Channing and Diane Wiest have a rhythm that feels built over years. Sandra is at her most sweet girl next door, and Nicole has never been sexier and more playful. You don't often see Nicole Kidman having fun in movies, or so I feel like, and it's so refreshing.
You know what? I feel like that's kind of true.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like she's usually having I mean, to be fair, she has some not so fun moments in this movie. But
True, yeah.
Yeah.
Sandra and her may not look like sisters, but they play them to perfection. The highs and lows, the ride or die, the silliness, they portray it so well. It's up there with Lilo and Stitch for movies that show the real sibling experience. Sally and Jillian and their personalities and quirks are very much like me and my sister. She never had to drug a guy, and I never accidentally killed one, but yes, I would drag the body if needed, and then lord a favor over her head. I'm gonna be the Aidan Quinn defense squad. I have always loved him and his character. It's different to not have a hero or an unbelievable hunk as the ultimate dream guy in this movie. No, he's just a kind, quiet, sweet, normal guy. Isn't that more relatable and down to earth? When it's all said and done, who doesn't want that? Quinn fits the bill and plays him in an understated way, but he still has chemistry with Sandra. I was low-key obsessed with him for a good while because of this movie. Some themes in this movie are underrated, I think. The thinly veiled story of Jillian escaping domestic abuse is more dramatic and well done than it gets credit for. It shows well how important having someone you can confide in matters in those situations, and how critical the support of family is. I also really like the messages behind Sally's story. There's something hopeful behind the spell she casts as a child. It's not so much that she wishes for someone impossible, because when you dissect what she asks for, it's not that extravagant. But as she grows older, and given that she lacks confidence, it's like she believes that she just doesn't deserve someone perfect for her. And only she can change that, as we see when her aunts try to guide her into a happy relationship and it fails. The family curse is like an excuse almost, symbolically speaking. It's only when she accepts herself, the witch side, and what she wants that it all falls into place. Along with Gary's very matter-of-fact perspective. He doesn't believe in the curse or in the spell, he just likes her and thinks she deserves to be loved. So it's all a reminder to not be afraid to ask for what you want and to believe you deserve it. Lovely. Maybe not a masterpiece of cinema, but certainly a movie with great rewatch value and a staple of the spooky season. I'm so glad you watched and liked it, especially Katie. How could you have missed this one given your age and interests? Now there, I believe a spell was involved.
Must have been.
Yeah, I don't really have any good excuse for that.
Yes. But no, that was great. Thank you, Matilde, for that. I agree pretty much across the board.
On Facebook, we had 1 vote for the book and 6 for the movie. Annie said, I think I just like the movie better because I saw it first a few times when I was younger.
That'll happen.
Yeah, that's totally fair. Ian said, I do love this movie. I remember going to see it in cinemas back when I was in middle school, and now that you brought it up, I don't remember what, if any, marketing they used for it. With the superstitious nature of Singapore, probably not a whole lot, if any. I thoroughly enjoyed it, always a fan of Sandy B, and she doesn't disappoint in this. The tonal shifts worked for me. They walked the fine line of rom-com and horror rather well, and I do like the grounding realism of the magic. It was refreshing and different to The Craft or even Sabrina. Practical magic made that much of an impression on me, this being the early days of when Hotmail was Hotmail was the on the wise way back. I created and indeed still use the email address based on the dark and unnatural line. I wonder if it's something to do with witchcraft that critics automatically gave it a fail. Believe it or not, Hocus Pocus also did not do well and only gained the cult following through Disney Channel repeats and VHS sales and rentals. I'm with Brian, and will fight with him on that hill defending this film. When you said you were covering this movie/book, I went to the iBooks app and nearly bought the book. My finger hovered over the buy button as I remembered what happened with the Jojo Rabbit book counterpart. That's a psychotic rant for another day if you ever cover
I
that.
did not know that was
Yeah, I
based on a
don't think
book.
I knew that was based on a book. I thought Taika Waititi wrote it.
Yeah, I did too.
Sounds like, while there are marked differences between the book and movie, the book is still the same spirit and likable characters. I won't be as averse to buying the book. If nothing else, this film proves there's nothing stronger than blood magic. I just don't recommend it. Bit violent on the body. I speak from experience.
There you go. Yeah, and actually the thing that was interesting is that quite a few of the reviews I saw on Rotten Tomatoes that were not great were actually more recent. Were like from
Interesting.
like I don't know if there was like a 2019. I saw a handful of them were from 2019. I don't know if there was like a re-release or something like that, or like it came out on Blu-ray or something. But yeah, and so that was also interesting to me. And a lot of them, and to me, a lot of them maybe felt just maybe there was some sexism or because a lot of them
Wouldn't
talked. There
surprise
was the
me.
tonal thing, but there was also a lot of them talked about it being like twee or like overly sentimental or overly kind of like twee, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I was like, I mean, maybe, but not. I don't know. Like, I
don't think I would call that movie twee.
Yeah, I don't know. I saw several reviews that were like, it's. I would have to go back and look now. I just after I was looking at the Rotten Tomato reviews just to kind of see like why does this have such bad reviews? Because you just get like the blurb from the authors and a handful of them of the rotten ones. I was like, I don't agree with this at all. Like, and they were like, it's like, because yeah, it's got a 24% on Rotten Tomatoes with 100 reviews, and a bunch of them, like I said, were some of them at least were. A lot of them are from 2019, or at least they say they're from 2019. Filmed in a golden syrupy light, Dune seems to have little ambition beyond making his stars look adorable and hoping we'll have forgotten most of the Witches of Eastwick, which I have not seen the Witches of Eastwick, so maybe it's derivative of that. I don't know. Practical magic, in other words, is anything but magical. The only spell it casts will put you right to sleep.
Disagree with that.
Disagree with that entirely.
Maybe people wanted it to be darker.
It toodles along being cute, but to further its notion of sisterhood and the power of women, it also takes a spin through Thelma and Louise territory, then revisits The Exorcist to up the supernatural content. It's enough to make your head spin. So that's the tonal thing.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's
not as big of an issue as I feel like people are
No.
making it out to be.
The film is so twee and polite that it almost passes by without any palpable register of emotion, tension, or surprise. I don't know what movie these people watched. I think you could say that about a few moments in the beginning, maybe. But like, I don't know. It's so strange. Again, there's another person saying, unfortunately, this is The Witches of Eastwick with its humor and sizzle removed. I have not seen The Witches of Eastwick.
I actually have not either. But I guess, yeah, maybe it's darker than this. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Because almost all of these reviews are from 2019 or later. Like none of these that I'm looking at.
That's interesting. Maybe we all need to go leave Rotten Tomatoes reviews for this movie.
Anyways, okay. Let's move on.
Our next comment on Facebook was from Terry, aka my mom, who said, I watched the movie for the first time last week, but I haven't read the book. After seeing the movie, I'm disappointed in myself for not having watched it when it came out and every October since. I thought it was really terrific. I don't do scary movies. Maybe that's why I avoided it. You may have commented on this. I was listening while driving and broke the episode into several chunks, but I think Jimmy Angelov was a vampire. Thought that from the first scene at the pool party where he's kind of standing off in the shadows, wearing sunglasses and targeting Jillian. Explains the reaction when he sees his reflection in Gary's police badge.
I think that could be...
I think that's really interesting.
There's definitely the like kind of implication in the movie, like they play around with that with him being from Bulgaria or
right.
Like they say, you know, and I think she even calls it, and then like the fact that he like doesn't sleep at night and all this sort of stuff. There's definitely they're definitely playing with that. I don't know which way I land on whether or not he like legitimately is,
like,
or if they're just
literally
kind of
a vampire.
Like if he's literally a vampire, or if they're just sort of playing with the imagery because of his character. You know what I mean? Like playing with, alluding to it and kind of giving him some of the characteristics, but he's just like a bad guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could see either. I think I prefer if he's not an actual vampire and is just a guy, but I don't think it necessarily hurts it particularly much for him to be a vampire.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
The clues are definitely there.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of Gary, I am not a huge fan of Aidan Quinn in this role. He's so monotone. I felt the same way about him in Legends of the Fall. Also, Gary, not a name that comes to mind when I think of romantic hero names. Apologies to any Garys out there.
I would agree that Gary is not necessarily...
I would have to agree that it would not be the first name that came to mind for my desirable hunky hero guy.
Not necessarily.
No.
But I like I said, as we discussed in the episode, I did like his performance overall. We talked about some people didn't for the same reasons that your mom cited there. But yeah, I think it works, but I can understand.
Definitely, and this kind of echoes back to what Mathilde said. He's giving a different kind of performance than you might expect for this type of character.
Yes.
So, it's going to work for some people and it's not going to work for others.
Yeah. I definitely understand the idea of why somebody, like, unlike the fact where I don't understand people who are like, oh, this movie tonally is like all over the place and a mess and doesn't work or whatever. I don't get why people would say that. I mean, it is tonally all over the place, but I think it works perfectly, and I don't understand why people say that. Whereas if somebody says, I think Aidan Quinn's a little kind of boring in this role, I would be like, yeah, like I get what you're saying. I like it. I think it works, but I get where you're coming from.
All in all, loved the movie, especially loved the gathering of the school moms for the coven. Heck, I'd have jumped at the chance, and I'll bet fellow grade school mom Melinda Kay would have too. That's my friend Sarah's mom.
Yes.
By the way, the phone chain was a thing, all caps. I was always at the bottom of the tree because I was a working mom, but that was okay by me. One more thing, loved the tequila drinking scene that went from lighthearted and fun to extremely creepy in the blink of an eye. Thanks for covering this film. It may become a tradition for me.
Fantastic. Love to hear it. And great comment.
Over on Twitter, we had 2 votes for the book and 5 for the movie. Kelly Napier was our only commenter that came out swinging for the book.
Okay.
Kelly said, this book was just a delight to read. The movie, for me, not so much. You all mentioned how you liked the fast tonal shifts, but I didn't. It felt like they couldn't decide what kind of movie they were trying to make. The whiplash between genres was hard to follow.
I mean, it is what it is. I thought it worked perfectly. Like I didn't feel tonal whiplash at all. To me, it just felt like it was decidedly all of the, like a horror comedy romance. It was all of those things, and it would change, kind of fluctuate between them at any given moment in a way that never felt jarring to me. But clearly you're not alone in that because a lot of the critics had
I
similar
mean, I
feelings.
guess it's kind of similar to the thing with Gary's character, is that it is kind of a different thing. So it's gonna work for some people really
Yeah, I
well and not
guess.
for others.
I guess. Like I said, I mean, I just said that this is the thing that I don't understand because to
Yeah.
me it works really well. Whereas I can kind of see what people are talking about with Aiden Quinn's performance, but for this, it to me it feels exactly. It's funny she mentions Buffy, but to me it feels exactly like watching like a Buffy episode
Mhm.
or Doctor Who or something where that those shows can fluctuate kind of
Yeah.
very sporadically
Right.
between silly and funny and goofy to like very serious and kind of intense. And again, maybe it's just, I don't know. To me, it just felt like any of those other types of movies or shows or whatever pieces of media that fluctuate tonally in this.
Mhm.
It also reminded me kind of like a Marvel movie in the way that it bounces back and forth between humor and all these other things. And again, it's one of those things where you're talking about this. There's not really, it's a very subjective thing. It's hard to say like, oh, explain. It's hard to explain exactly why it worked for me or us, and maybe and didn't work for other people. It's just
Mhm.
kind of one of those things where
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and I do think, when you've got a supernatural element to your media, you are going to have to kind of contend with that horror element, even if it's not really a horror movie or a horror show
yeah,
per se. I think that is something that you're going to occasionally have to contend with. And maybe some things are just better at it than others, or it
yeah,
works better for people in other things.
yeah. I think the thing that's interesting is I really, it. I think the thing that worked for me, and I'm sure because I'm trying to like really narrow it down and say like why the tonal shifts worked, is that I felt like throughout all of it, even at its most serious, it still had a a frosting, a coating of like kind of camp or like
Mhm.
not taking itself too seriously even in its most serious moments
Mhm.
that kind of effused through all of it that kind of smoothed out the tonal shifts for me maybe. I don't know, like I'm trying, like even in the most intense dark horrifying moments of like the scenes in the car and stuff, there's still this undercurrent of like wackiness to it that is I think maybe what made it work. I don't know. I don't know. Again, it's hard to explain like tonally like why it works for us and not other people. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Oh, so Kelly went on to say, I chuckled to myself while reading the book when they entombed Jimmy under the patio. I've seen enough episodes of Buffy, Supernatural, and The X-Files to know that someone in the future will break open that patio and let his spirit out. One thing that surprised me in the movie, when Sally's kid, I can't remember which one, curses the bully kid to get chicken pox, why didn't we see if he actually got it or not? It just moved on and never showed us if anything actually came of the curse.
No, we do
It
see
did
him.
though,
Yeah,
yes.
you might have missed
It
it.
was it was a blink and you miss it moment.
Yeah,
When Gary is going through the
yeah,
town, we get that montage of him like talking to people
hmm
about the Owenses.
yeah.
There's like a blink and you miss it moment when that mom is talking and the kid
The
is
kid is
standing by
there and
her
he has
and he
chicken
has
pox.
chicken
Yeah.
pox.
So yeah, it does come back. It's very brief
Yeah.
in kind of in one scene, but it does. Yeah, it does. It is paid off.
Over on Instagram, we had 0 votes for the book and 11 for the movie. The movie ran away with it on
Wow.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Tashlyn Lewis said, Hey, I didn't read the book, and for some reason, I've never watched the movie before this, but I'm really happy that I did watch it for the episode. I have always loved the 90s witchy shows like Charmed and Sabrina the Teenage Witch, so this was a nostalgic watch for me. Nothing to add to what you guys said, but just wanted to say that the bit where the Jimmy character was on the side of the road peeing, I figured he had the car keys with him. That's why they didn't drive off. Seems like he was playing with the keys in his hand when he walked back to the car.
This seems abundantly obvious to me now. As soon as you
Yeah,
said it,
this
that's
makes
probably
perfect sense. I would have to go back
I
'cause
don't
I mean,
recall that.
obviously, I missed
we
it
missed
if
that,
he's,
yeah.
like, obviously got the keys in his
Yeah.
hands. I would have to go back and look, but this makes
That makes
absolute perfect
absolute
sense.
sense. So that's probably almost assuredly what
Yeah.
happened. Yeah.
And our last comment on Instagram was from Kevin Smith, who said,
The Kevin
"I
Smith?
don't think
I don't
so."
think it's the Kevin Smith.
But it is a Kevin Smith,
Yeah.
who said, "I have to say the movie because I didn't even know it was a book, but then I didn't enjoy the movie. So should I withdraw my vote?" Do whatever you want, Kevin.
Yeah. It's,
I don't always.
I guess on
sometimes
Instagram
I
we
don't
don't
like.
have a
Yeah, we don't have any other
yeah,
options,
any
on,
other
Instagram,
options on Instagram.
But sometimes I don't like either,
Yeah.
and I still choose one
That's
because
true.
I have to. That's my job.
Yep. So how did we break down?
The movie won by a landslide,
Yeah.
with 26 votes to the book's 3, plus one listener who couldn't decide.
There you go. All right, it's time for our, well, not time for it now, but we're getting to our main spooky episode of this Halloween season. We're talking about Carrie. So let's learn a little bit about Carrie the novel.
It's the night of the senior prom. The Bates High School gym is alive with excitement. Everybody is there. Even Carrie White, the girl no one likes.
We're all sorry about this incident, Cassie.
It's Carrie!
And everyone makes fun of her.
Free, Carrie!
The girl who lives in that creepy house with her crazy mother.
Carrie is a 1974 horror novel by American author Stephen King. It is King's first novel in what would go on to be a very long career. When King started writing Carrie, it was actually intended to be a short story for the men's magazine Cavalier, but after a friend's suggestion that he write a story about a female character, which is an interesting choice for a men's magazine, but good, I guess.
Yeah.
However, after he wrote the opening shower scene, King experienced some discomfort with the whole thing. Obviously he's not a high school girl.
Yeah.
And felt uncomfortable about that, and he felt like, I don't know how I would react to this happening to me. And then after he wrote about 3 pages, he threw away the manuscript. But the next day, his wife, Tabitha, got the pages out of the trash and convinced him to continue writing the story with some input from her.
Yeah, there you go.
So, spouses supporting spouses, we love to see it. I don't know if they're still married, so maybe don't hold me to that if they're not.
Yeah.
But King was able to emotionally connect to Carrie by thinking about 2 girls that he actually had known when he was younger. One who was like constantly bullied and abused at school due to her family's poverty, forcing her to only wear one outfit to school. And he talks about these girls in the intro to the edition of Carrie that I have. And the other was a very timid girl from a devoutly religious family. Here's a fun fact. The original ending of Carrie had Carrie growing demon horns and destroying an airplane thousands of miles above her.
Wow.
Yeah. However, King's friend and editor Bill Thompson convinced him to rewrite the ending to be more subtle.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't know anything about the movie,
Yeah.
so I'm saying that, like,
I mean, just going off of that, I'm going to say that was a good call.
sounds like it, yeah. Without knowing what the book or the movie does. It sounds
Yeah.
like a good idea. That sounds maybe dumb, but who knows?
It was also Thompson who saw the potential in this project. He saw, in light of recent horror novels successes like Rosemary's Baby, he said, hey, maybe we have something here. And he convinced Lee Barker, who was the executive editor at Doubleday, to accept the novel. He also convinced him to boost the advance to 2,500, which was moderately high for a debut novel at the time.
Interesting. We'll get back when I get to a note later. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
That number's interesting, though.
Okay.
I'll just tell you. We'll get to it in a second.
Although Carrie was marketed as an occult novel, trade reviewers at the time of release called it a horror novel. Based on what I know about it, I feel like horror is a better fit. I wouldn't call it occult necessarily.
I know
but
I can't even. I literally know nothing about this story other than the prom scene from the movie. That is the only thing I know.
Like what I have absorbed through cultural osmosis.
I feel like I've absorbed like nothing other than the prom scene. Like I literally have no idea.
I think I might know more than you.
Yeah, I think you do. It would be almost impossible not to.
In its first year, the paperback edition of Carrie sold 1 million copies. Those sales were bolstered by the 1976 film adaptation, which we'll talk about in a minute. And Carrie ended up becoming a New York Times bestseller in December of 1976, and it remained on that list for 14 weeks, peaking at number 3. Since its initial publication, Carrie has remained in continual print, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Carrie received generally positive reviews, and it has become a fan favorite. Various critics considered it an impressive literary debut. Newgate Calendar, which is a person's name,
is a human being
of the New York Times, stated that despite being a debut novel, quote, King writes with the kind of surety normally associated only with veteran writers.
Mm-hmm.
So he came out already a veteran.
I mean,
apparently.
It does not surprise me to find out that Stephen King kind of was great from the start.
Yeah,
like,
he just skipped over all of the normal getting
seems,
started stuff.
Seems reasonable.
Library Journal declared the novel, quote, a terrifying treat for both horror and parapsychology fans.
Okay.
Mary Sheedle of the San Francisco Examiner wrote that Carrie, quote, goes far beyond the usual limitations of the horror genre to deliver a message about humanity.
What does this person think the horror genre is?
I would take umbrage with that because that's all the horror genre does.
To be fair, that's all most genres do.
That's also fair.
It's stories being written by humans about humans. It's kind of... that's...
I mean, I can only assume that maybe she's comparing it to like incredibly
really pulpy,
like just the
bottom of the barrel,
super bottom of the barrel stuff,
I guess.
Anyway, Carrie launched Stephen King's career as an author.
If we know anything about horror, it's that Edgar Allan Poe, maybe the originator of the form, I don't know if that's true, but never had anything to say about humanity.
Definitely not.
Or the human psyche.
Or the human condition.
Or the human condition. It's just, that's a mind-blowing thing to write as a critic, I feel like, but I just...
definitely did not tap into the urge that we've all had to wall up one of our coworkers.
It's just such a fascinating thing to write. Like I said, you could only be
she's got to be comparing it to just the worst paperback dime novels you can come up with. Anyway, Carrie launched Stephen King's career as an author. He got $200,000 for when it was accepted for mass market publication, and that money allowed him to quit his job as a teacher and become a full-time author. The novel also established King as a horror writer that wrote about the supernatural, the dark, and the bizarre. Both the novel and its 1976 film adaptation brought King into the mainstream, and he has since become one of the most successful authors in the modern era, with his novels consistently becoming bestsellers, which he's an outlier that should not have been counted. Like, in all aspects of his career.
Yeah.
We don't count Stephen King. Don't compare yourself to him. No. Author Jeff Vandermeer, who wrote, what is that one that you like? With Natalie Portman and the glowing
Annihilation.
Things. Yes. Annihilation.
I thought that name looked familiar, and I was like, wait, that's... Yeah.
He said of Carrie's influence, quote, Carrie changed the paradigm by announcing a very American form of horror that broke with the past. That process might have been ongoing anyway, but a lot of horror and weird fiction was still in a kind of post-M.R. James/Lovecraft mode of parchment and shadowy alleys and half-seen horrors, and here was King dropping buckets of blood over everything and making characterization more relaxed and more contemporary.
Huh.
So according to Jeff Vandermeer, we have Stephen King to thank for modern horror.
Okay. I mean, that doesn't seem
Also
wrong.
doesn't seem completely out of the realm of possibility.
No, that doesn't seem wrong.
Aside from the film that we'll be covering, Carrie has been adapted as a stage musical in 1988 that was a commercial and critical failure.
Mm-hmm.
A 2002 television film directed by Brian Fuller that received negative reviews, and a 2013 film starring Chloe Grace Moretz that received mixed reviews.
Mm-hmm.
A sequel titled The Rage Carrie 2 came out in 1999 and also received mixed reviews. And I'm pretty sure I've seen part of that movie, and I thought it might have been because you and Kyle covered it on Good, Bad, or Bad,
not.
but I couldn't find it on your YouTube.
No,
but
we have not done
I'm
it. I can tell you.
positive I've seen at least part of The Rage Carrie 2.
I don't
Which
know.
feels like a crime considering I haven't seen the original one.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's interesting. It's also interesting. I knew that Chloe Grace Moretz was in the remake in 2013, but that's so funny because she was also in the American remake of Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
And Let Me In.
Yeah.
Like right around the same time. She was doing like horror remakes for a while there, I guess.
I guess so.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. All right. Speaking of adaptations, though, let's talk now a little bit about Carrie, the film.
Help the sinning woman see the sin of her days and ways. Show her that if she had remained sinless, the curse of blood would never have come on her.
The girl with the strange power.
If I concentrate hard enough, I can move things.
But tonight, no one will laugh at Carrie.
If you don't have a date for the prom next Friday, would you like to go with me?
She's with the best-looking boy in the senior class.
He's trying to trick me again.
She'll be voted queen of the prom.
You know, I can make sure that you don't hurt Carrie White anymore.
For Carrie, it will be a dream come true. For everyone else, it will be a nightmare.
Carrie is a 1976 film directed by Brian De Palma, who did Scarface, The Untouchables, The First Mission Impossible, among a bunch of other movies. Very famous director. And it was written by Lawrence D. Cohen, who basically just did this, but also did the 2013 remake, was the screenwriter for that.
Interesting.
Also wrote the 1990 TV miniseries of It.
Oh, the one with Tim Curry?
Yes, I believe that's that one. I think. And then also did an adaptation of The Tommyknockers, which is another King novel. And was the writer on the musical that you mentioned, the failed musical.
Man, he's really...
He has actually almost no credits other than these like handful of things. It's yeah.
This man is 1 for 3 on adaptations of Carrie.
Yeah. And it's almost his entire career, other than again
That's so interesting.
The It miniseries and then Tommyknockers, and there was a couple others. I don't want to say that, but it was not much else other than that. The film stars Sissy Spacek, Amy Irving, William Catt, Nancy Allen, John Travolta, Beth Buckley, PJ Soles, Sidney Lassick, Stefan Garash, Priscilla Pointer, Piper Laurie, and Edie McClurg.
I didn't know John Travolta was in this movie.
Yes, as a small part as one of the other students. Yeah. Yep. The film has a 93% on Rotten Tomatoes, an 86 on Metacritic, and a 7.4 out of 10 on IMDb. It made $33.8 million against a budget of just $1.8 million. So it was a pretty big success for United. I believe United Artists was the studio that did this one. And it was nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Actress for Sissy Spacek and Best Supporting Actress for Piper Laurie. So mother and daughter both got nominated. Neither one, but both were nominated. Which was also a genre movie like this getting nominated.
Yeah, that's really that's kind of cool. I mean, even now it's kind of rare.
Yeah, it's not. It's like become more common, but it's still not super common for like a horror film to get nominations at the Oscars. Again, it was the performances, which is a little more common maybe, but even then, not particularly. So, as Katie mentioned, Carrie was King's first novel, and as a result, it ended up being the first King work to be adapted into a feature film. King was 26 at the time that this was optioned, and according to an interview in 2010, he was apparently paid $2,500 for the film rights. That's why I was saying when you said he got a $2,500 advance for the book, I was like, I wonder if these are maybe facts that have somehow
maybe they've melded
together, and or maybe he got paid $2,500 for the film rights and $2,500 for the advance on the book or whatever. I just thought it was interesting that both of those numbers
and clearly
were the same.
this got optioned immediately.
Yes, basically, yeah. But we're gonna get into it. So De Palma read the book on a Brian De Palma, the director, read the book on a recommendation from a friend of his who was a writer who was also friends with Stephen King. And De Palma liked the book so much, he decided he wanted to direct it. And so he knew that several other studios were considering going after the rights at the time because the book came out and was kind of blowing up. And so he made some calls about the book saying that he wanted to direct it. And according to him, then nothing happened for, I guess, 6 months, end quote. So he called about it, nothing happened. And then 6 months later, they were able to move forward as United Artists secured the rights. Then Lawrence D. Cohen was brought on to write the film, and the budget was set at $1.6 million, which apparently, even at that time, was a small budget. Even in 1975, that was considered a pretty small budget for a film like this. And as a result of that smaller budget, eventually that did balloon up a little bit to $1.8 million.
Right.
But as a result of the smaller budget, several scenes that were scripted for the film ended up being cut and not filmed because of financial reasons. So be interested to see if there's some stuff that's missing when we get to the film.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to look
some
for.
of the scenes that you're like, oh, this wasn't in the book or this wasn't in the movie, but it was in the book. It's very possible that some of that was cut for financial reasons, depending on what it is. I'm seeing I saw several conflicting reports on who De Palma's first choice for Carrie was. On Wikipedia, it states that Betsy Slade was his primary choice for Carrie. And then on IMDb, in the trivia and stuff, it says Amy Irving was his primary choice for Carrie. Irving would go on to play Sue in the film. But either way, Sissy Spacek was not considered until her husband, Jack Fisk, who was an art director on the film, convinced both her and De Palma to consider the role. So he convinced Sissy Spacek to go for the role, and he convinced Brian De Palma to consider her for the role. And ultimately, she would land the role. And she was so determined to land the role that she supposedly skipped a TV commercial that she was scheduled to go shoot to go to this screen test for this film. And while doing that, she apparently rubbed Vaseline in her hair, dirtied up her face, or not dirtied up her face, but didn't shower for a couple days or something, and then showed up to the screen test in a sailor dress that her mother had made for her in 7th grade that had its hem messed up or something. And apparently this got her, not that exclusively got her the part, but she ended up getting the part. After going
sounds like she was in character.
Yes,
already.
Apparently. So during production, director of photography Isidore Mankowski ended up being replaced by Mario Tosi during filming because De Palma and Mankowski did not get along. They had quite a tumultuous working relationship, and it ended up with Mankowski getting kicked off the film or leaving. I couldn't find exactly. So getting into some fun trivia from IMDb here, Sissy Spacek prepared for her character by isolating herself from the rest of the cast and decorating her dressing room with heavy religious iconography. She also apparently studied Gustave Doré's illustrated Bible, and she said she would study the, quote, the body language of people being stoned for their sins, end quote, and then would incorporate that body language into her performance of Carrie. That's what she said. Yep. So while filming the famous bloody prom sequence, Sissy Spacek's trailer was parked right behind the set, and after being covered in fake blood for continuity purposes, supposedly Spacek refused to wash the blood off and elected instead to sleep in her bloody clothes for 3 days of filming. Ultimately, the prom scene would take over 2 weeks to shoot and required a total of 35 takes. Again, those two things kind of conflict, but it's possible that the blood part was only a few days or whatever, and then the rest of the prom scene, they filmed over the 2 weeks or whatever. But yeah, apparently she committed because she didn't want the continuity to get messed up.
Imagine
even though they told her it would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been fine. No one would have noticed.
Yeah. So according to Piper Laurie, who plays Carrie's mom in this, she honestly thought that her character was way too over the top to be taken seriously. And De Palma had to tell her continuously that it was a horror film and not a black comedy. She thought it was a black comedy. And even though he told her this consistently, she would burst out in laughter between takes because she thought her characterization and wardrobe was like laughable. And that the dialogue was like way too humorous. And to this day, supposedly, she still maintains that this film is a black comedy and not a horror movie.
Huh.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Despite everybody else's involvement telling her no. So I'll be interested to see if, maybe, who knows. Supposedly, and this is interesting, Stephen King actually prefers the ending of this movie to the ending that he wrote in the novel. And I've saw even beyond that overall that supposedly he actually just prefers this film to his novel. Is what I have seen.
Well, Stephen King, I'll be the judge of that.
Yeah. And then my last fun fact before we get into some reviews is that Sissy Spacek apparently asked Brian De Palma how she should react when Carrie first realizes that she's bleeding in the shower at the beginning. And De Palma told her, quote, "It's like you've been hit by a Mack truck," end quote. And I had to include this because it's just so funny. So then Spacek went and talked to Jack, her husband, who was the art director on the film, who apparently as a child had been run over by a car while standing in the street looking at Christmas lights. And then she used his description of this experience as the basis for her scene because De Palma told her it's like you've been hit by a Mack truck, which is such a weird roundabout. I don't know. It's all very strange to me.
That's also like, that's a weird way to describe
I agree.
what's happening in that scene.
Yes, I agree that his direction there feels really weird to me.
Yeah.
And then her way of interpreting it seems kind of weird. And then, like, it almost seems to me like he said that line, like, it seems like kind of a poor way to get across, like, her shock and surprise or whatever. And then she took it very literally.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know.
And just like, luckily, her husband happened to have been hit by a car once.
It's all very strange. The whole thing is just very funny to me. But getting to some reviews, Pauline Kael of The New Yorker said that, quote, Carrie was, quote, the best scary, funny movie since Jaws, a teasing, terrifying, lyrical shocker, end quote. Take One Magazine's critic Susan Schenker said she was, quote, angry at the way Carrie manipulated me to the point where my heart was thudding and embarrassed because the film really works, end quote. In a 1998 edition of the Movie Guide, they said, quote, Carrie is a landmark horror film. And then Stephen Farber, writing for the 1978 issue of New West magazine, kind of prophetically wrote, quote, it's a horror classic, and years from now, it will still be written and argued about, and it will still be scaring the daylights out of new generations of moviegoers.
And hey, here we are writing and arguing about it.
There you go. And then this one's fun. Quentin Tarantino actually put Carrie at number 8 on his list of his favorite films of all time. And then, actually, I think this is a slightly more negative review. Andrew Saris, writing for The Village Voice, said, quote, there are so few incidents that 2 extended sequences are rendered in slow motion as if to pad out the running time, end quote. And then Siskel, Ebert's partner, writing for the Chicago Tribune, gave the film 2.5 stars out of 4 and called it, quote, a crude shocker with a little style. But he did praise, quote, the strong performances, and going on to opine that the movie falls apart during the climax, which he described as crude and sloppy. End
That's
quote.
interesting, because the climax of this movie, I feel like, is the only thing that people remember
pretty much
about this movie.
But Siskel was not on the same page with our final reviewer, Roger Ebert, writing for the Chicago Sun-Times, stated that the film was, quote, an absolutely spellbinding horror movie as well as an observant human portrait, and he gave the film 3.5 stars out of 4. So a whole star more than Siskel. Ebert was a big fan, whereas Siskel, not as much.
The criticism about the slow motion sequences padding out the running time is really funny to me, because that's the kind of thing that you guys would point out in Good, Bad, or Bad, Bad.
Yes, I'll be interested to see because I've watched some of the prom scene again because I did kind of a spoof homage to it for a project not too long ago. So I've watched some of the prom scene. I'm sure not the whole thing, but like the main part that people know. And there is a lot of like kind of repetitive editing and slow motion and stuff. That it's hard to tell watching just that clip how well it works in the context of the film.
In the bigger picture.
In that scene, it feels a little kind of redundant and like, but it could work tension wise and stuff and pacing wise with the whole movie. That it could work. It's hard to know just watching that one scene completely out of context. So. All right, those are all the fun facts and everything we had about Carrie. We wanted to remind you if you can do us a giant favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads, any of the social media platforms. Make sure you follow, like, subscribe, do all that stuff you can so you see our posts and interact with them. We'd love to hear from you. Head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to us. Drop us a little 5-star rating, write us a review. And if you head over to patreon.com/thisfilmisit, support us there. You get access to bonus content. We would appreciate that a lot. This month for October, we just watched last night our October bonus, which was Black Swan. We will be recording that here very soon, and that will be out in the next week or so. Our discussion of Black Swan. So look out for that. $5 and up patrons. Katie, where can people watch Carrie?
Well, as always, you can check with your local library or a local video rental store if you still have one. Odds are good. One of those places is going to come through for you with this one.
Yep.
You can also stream this free through Canopy, according to the internet. I think so, and I don't really know how Canopy works.
I don't either.
Like, I don't know if you need to have a corresponding library subscription or not, but according to the internet, you can stream this free with Canopy.
And that, just in case you're searching for that, it's spelled Kanopy.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for Canopy, that's what it is.
You can also stream this with a subscription to HBO Max or Paramount Plus.
Okay.
Or you can rent it for around $2 to $4 from Redbox, Apple TV, Amazon, Vudu, or DirecTV.
Well, all right. Yeah, those are the places you can watch Carrie. This should be fun. I'm for a movie that is, kind of as prolific as this film is. I truly know nothing about it.
I know some things. I've never seen it.
Yeah.
And I don't know all that much about the book. So
yeah. Cool. Well, that's what we're talking about. Come back in 1 week's time. We've got Carrie. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, everybody else.
Keep reading books.
Keep watching movies.
And keep being awesome.